Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I post writing related videos, usually on Wednesdays, so consider subscribing. Today, I'm diving into part 2 of my updated outlining method. If you haven't, go check out last week's video. It's super important to do each step in this process, even if they may seem silly to you, and you may already know the answers to them. They build up in the later steps that I'm about to go over. To recap, stage 1 focused on brainstorming and stage 2 focused on that 1-sentence or 3-sentence summary. All right, so stage 3, hit the keys, the 8 key plot points, that is, which is so perfect because 8 is my favorite number. I have read more theories on outlining than I can even ever possibly remember. After writing the Elysian Prophecy, I realized that I needed a formula, and so I kind of gathered up all those outlining resources that I had used before, and I went over them to see what seemed most useful to me. So why does this structure that I'm about to go over work? It's a framework, and frames or foundations are super important. Your story needs a focus, and like writing your 1-sentence summary, hitting these 8 plot points makes it easier to write a strong story that has that focus. With that being said, there is no magic formula that applies to everyone. I do believe there's a magic formula that everyone can develop for themselves, but this takes trial and error. And after a lot of trial and error, I've outlined 2 books using this method, and it's worked so well for me. So I'm hoping it can serve as a foundation for you guys. We all start somewhere, and I seriously hope this structure just helps you. All right, so here are the 8 key points. Let me scoot over so you guys can see it. Homeland, catalyst number 1, emotional/reactive phase. Catalyst number 2, take charge/proactive phase. Catalyst number 3, climax and conclusion. Repeat for however many point of view characters that you have, because each should have their own journey through the story. If they don't, you might need to reevaluate their importance in the story. Also, you can apply this method in post. I mean in your editing. Not post. I've been editing too many videos lately. Even if you've already finished your first draft, or any draft really, see if you've hit all 8 plot points in your story. This helped me tremendously when I was in the editing process of the Elysian Prophecy. One character was pretty much falling flat because her second catalyst didn't propel her into being proactive instead of reactive. She was still reactive, so fixing that, like one tiny thing, made her character and her side of the story just so much stronger. All right, now let's go over each one of those plot points. We have Homeland, and just as it sounds, this introduces us to the character in the world they currently live in. This is where we connect with the protagonist and we empathize with them. If readers don't have this foundation, they won't care what happens to them later. We may follow them on an everyday errand or event, but we're introduced or hinted toward the story's problem, which you already figured out from watching last week's video, right? Next up is catalyst number 1. This is the first oh shit moment. Something happens that forces the protagonist onto a new path and dramatically changes their life. You want this to happen around the 20% mark of your novel. Next is emotional/reactive phase. The hero reacts to catalyst number 1 in an emotional manner. They're stumbling around, following the plot more than actually affecting it, aka things happen to them. In essence, they're like a chicken running around with its head cut off. Catalyst number 2, the protagonist gets a piece of information that gives focus and meaning to the story problem. All of their haphazardous reactions are funneled into one direction. And this is where the protagonist learns who the antagonist is. This catalyst gives the protagonist a reason to play the game, basically. Following that is the offense/proactive phase. Because of catalyst number 2, your character switches gears and goes on the offensive. Since they've been convinced somehow to play the game, they're now directly affecting the plot instead of following it. This is where the trail of tears happens. Your character will try and fail and try and fail, and it's important that they fail a few times to raise the stakes, probably more than a few times. You want those stakes to be pretty high. Now we're on to catalyst number 3. This is where your character gets one last crucial piece of information that leads them on to meet the antagonist for one last battle for the climax. This is where a lot of plot twists occur and where your character should experience some kind of breakdown moment before switching into ass-kicking gear. We're almost to the end. Climax is the battle royale of your novel. Shit has to go down big time. Your character should be beat down until the reader can't see how they'll come out alive at all. The reader doesn't know how the heck this is going to be resolved. They're turning pages to see how it ends. Some common patterns here. I did not explain this well in the video, so I'm explaining it again. Basically, either your anti-hero or your hero wins at the very end. So a common pattern is the hero seems to be winning in the beginning, and then it turns and the anti-hero is really winning. And then at the last minute, the hero comes back and actually defeats the villain. And then the exact opposite can be true, where the villain actually wins. That's pretty much every horror movie these days. Last up is your conclusion. Your protagonist should be injured from the climax, mentally and physically. If they're not, then your climax wasn't big enough. This phase should wrap up the change that your character has gone through and is another place for some more plot twists to occur. Additional tip, your story problem needs to be answered by the end of book 1. For a series, you need a separate series problem that will continue throughout, but the book 1 problem needs to be solved by the end of book 1, or your readers are going to be really pissed. All right, so once you've figured out all of those little pieces for your story, the last part is stage 4, and that is actually the outline. That seems like a daunting word, outline. We've been building up to it the entire time. We're finally at this point, but that's why it's so important to do the baby steps, because now this stage is so much easier. Think of an outline instead as a scene list, which sounds so much friendlier. Write out all the scenes you've come up with so far, including all of the previously discussed plot points. The 8 plot points. Flashcards work perfectly for this, and I highly suggest this to anyone who is struggling with their story or their outline. If you're having problems making your outline, use flashcards. This can be done at any time during the writing phase, so don't worry if you've already written your story. If you're having some issue, just make the flashcards. I didn't use flashcards for my last 2 story outlines that I recently did, but I did with the Elysian Prophecy, and trust me, something happens when you write your story down on flashcards. Like, it's magic. This is the stage where things get arbitrary. Up until this point, there's been a formula, but now things diverge from one story to the next. Make your flashcards and then analyze each one of them. Every scene should lead away from one and then lead toward another. I always forget this is like backwards for you guys. Some say that the end of one chapter should pose a question to be answered by the middle of the next chapter. This is where doing your own homework on outlining can be helpful, because this is where things may speak to you more than they might have spoken to me or another writer. Look at your supporting characters. Can any one of them serve a role in a subplot? Tidbits like this can lead to bigger plots in subsequent novels, and this is pretty obscure, but Beautiful Creatures does this when the 3 sisters are introduced, and then they end up having a much larger role, and I think that's in book 3. Demographically speaking, I don't know how many of you have read that book. It was just the first one that came to mind. Once you're done with your flashcards, it can be helpful to add a summary to each scene card, which I usually do in Google Docs, but you can do it in Scrivener or any other word processor. This serves as a guide to keep you focused when it is time to actually sit down and write. If you're feeling inspired to read more about outlines or to create your own formula that works for you, I really recommend the Better Novel Project, which sort of focuses on the hero's journey type of story, and Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, which is actually for screenplays but applies to novels as well. Actually, I think I lost a book over here. I had another book over here. Boom! Save the Cat. It looks pristine, but just like, I promise I read it. All right, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope this was super helpful. Be sure to come back to my channel this week because I have 2 more videos for y'all. A review of the Erin Condren Life Planner and how I'm using it for Nano, and a vlog on my final preparations for Nano. Bye, guys. Oh my gosh, I can't speak. Blah, 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 blah.